Who had been a muscular, tall, handsome, popular ladies' man, was suddenly thrust into having skin grafts, scars, little hair, and an inability to move like he used to. His entire body was covered in lumpy, uneven skin. His skin grafts prevented him from moving about freely. His high school sports career was over forever. He is restricted in more ways than one because of his physiology. When Doug arrived home, it was dark. He used to love the dark. It meant another party was going to start. But all Doug could think about was the fact that all of his friends didn't even send a card to him while he was in the hospital. All the people who he thought were his friends turned out to just be using him for his looks and popularity. Doug had not spoken since the explosion at the high school. His neighbors watched from their windows as he walked into his house. His house, which used to be a haven for all his friends and him to get drunk and act like teenagers, had turned into a constant reminder of what his life used to be. Doug could not face his house with lights on. It led to too many thoughts of his inability to speak and inability to handle a social interaction. The dark house provided a temporary sanctuary from Doug's dark thoughts about his past, his present, and his future. Once the lights were on, all of his fears and anxiety immediately rushed back into his head, like a pack of dogs rushing to ravage a dead animal. Doug vividly remembered that fateful day at his high school. As he was walking to fifth period, he smiled and said hi to his friend Natalie. The two passed each other. There was a large boom sound, and the rest is completely blank in Doug's mind. Doug's time in the hospital is blank because he was unconscious for most of it. As he was lying in bed unconscious, covered like a mummy because of his burns, he had shivers and violent attacks. On night 4 in the hospital, Doug is alone in his room and he starts to wake up after being unconscious. Doug has no idea where he is. The room is completely dark and he needs to pee. He slowly gets up with intense pain. At this point, most of the bandages have come off, revealing his burn marks and skin grafts. Doug makes it to the bathroom after an excruciatingly painful walk. He now realizes something is wrong and he is in a hospital gown. He searches for a light, finds it, and turns it on. The first thing he sees is the light abruptly turns on as his burnt face's reflection in a mirror. He screams at the top of his lungs and faints from pain and fear. The next day is a blur for Doug as he slowly shifts in and out of consciousness. The only thing Doug thinks about is how his estate reminds him of his numerous times getting just a little too drunk. Doug is back in his room in his house as his alarm is going off. He has to face Timus High for the first time since the explosion. Months go by as Doug continues to not speak. He sits alone at lunch and in all his classes he does not participate. He has no friends and is petrified at the idea of people even looking at him. He only wears clothes that cover up as much of his body and face as possible. He still cannot look in the mirror without intense fear of the monster looking back at him. He is sitting in lunch alone as he does his usual scan to see if anyone is looking at him. He sat at the one table where the light is completely blocked and Doug is in darkness. All of a sudden, this girl walks up and sits across from him. They stare into each other's eyes, not saying anything, just staring. He would usually run away or completely cover his head and face from her view. But he's not. It's the first time he feels like someone is looking at his eyes and not at his now mangled face. He feels like she is staring into his soul and he is staring right back. There are no words spoken, and somehow they immediately connect and feel each other's pain and heartbreak. The girl says, "Hi, you're sitting at my table, why?" Gets quieter and starts to feel uncomfortable. Did you sit here before the accident? Doug, I am just... Why are you talking to a monster like me? He says with a very shaky voice. The two continue talking, and for the first time, Doug forgets about the explosion and his burns. He feels like a normal teenager again. He is completely unguarded and comfortable with Lisa. The two become friends fast, hanging out together every day. Then, on a random Thursday, Lisa reveals to Doug that she has to move again. His brief time of being able to connect with someone and talk again immediately stopped. Doug starts shaking and crying, and he has to run out of the room. He stopped talking to Lisa and became a recluse once again. He starts eating lunch in the bathroom to avoid the students who seem to be staring at him even more now. Every time he walks in the school, the bright light seemed to point out what a monster he was even more. So whenever he would go to the bathroom to eat, he would turn off the lights and immediately feel safer. Whenever he rejoiced in the dark, he would remember his old love of the light where he played sports and had parties. Now his houses dark each and every day. His last party was the day before the explosion that changed everything.